Right. Start number 2. Welcome to this extraordinary meeting of the Audit, Compliance and Governance Committee, being held today at the 19th of March. My name's Councillor Adrian Bamford and I'm the chair of the committee. This meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast on its YouTube channel and for training purposes. If there are any breaks in transmission to the YouTube... Really? Oh, I think I said that very well.
Has somebody got sound on their laptop? Has somebody got sound on their laptop? Is somebody watching it on their laptop?
Matt and I have this ghostly other presence, obviously. Could it be a phone? Actually, my phone is probably not on silent, which it should be anyway.
Yesterday it was sound coming out of somebody else's machine.
Well, I mean, let me put mine on silent, see if that makes any difference.
This isn't weird at all, is it? It's coming out the speakers. Try stopping the stream and we'll restart.
I'm on silent now. Does it make any difference?
Stop. Is this on silent? No. Is this on?
No, it's not making any difference.
Somebody's got the sound on. Could you just say hello again, Adrian, and we'll see if we've solved it.
Third time lucky, eh?
Well,
Do you want me to start from the beginning again?
yeah, that'd be good.
Okay.
That's all right.
Welcome to this extraordinary meeting of the Audit, Compliance and Governance Committee, being held today, Tuesday the 19th of March. My name is Councillor Adrian Bamford and I'm the chair of the committee. This meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast on its YouTube channel and for training purposes. If there are any breaks in transmission to the YouTube stream, the meeting will be adjourned for a short period until any issues are resolved. Can I ask everyone to speak clearly when addressing the meeting and that officers introduce themselves when they speak? All good? No echoes? Excellent. So, firstly, we move on to apologies, and there are many. Councillors Willingham, McCloskey, Beale and Joy, but I'm pleased to say that the committee is still quorate, so we can proceed with business. And the first item is declarations of interest. Anything from Matt or Stan? No? Right. So I'll move on to the minutes of the last meeting. I've checked these very thoroughly and I apologise if there are any typos that I've missed, but I'm very happy with them. How about you two? Okay? Brilliant. I will sign them off if I've got a pen. Thank you. Thank you. Right. Well, essentially we have a one-item agenda tonight, that being the report from the external auditors of their value for money findings for 2021, 22 and 22, 23. And this is going to be their final value for money report to us. And because we've got a one-item agenda, I'm hoping to try and chop this up a little bit so we can work through it steadily and ask questions section by section. And I wonder if Pete could first of all give us a general introduction to why these two audits are coming before us now and what the process will be given that we've now got this backstop in place. And perhaps sort of take us through to page 17, in other words, the first few pages of the report, where we're talking about the summary and the fact that I was delighted to see that there are no significant weaknesses in arrangements found, basically, under all heads. Anyway, I'll leave that for you to talk about.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, committee. So, as the Chair said, this is a combined report for both 21-22 and 22-23. So, just to remind members, as your external auditors, our role is twofold. It's an opinion on the financial statements and a value for money conclusion. And in terms of value for money, that means lots of things to lots of people. But when we look at it from an external audit point of view, it's based on the NAO code. So we go into quite a lot of detail in three areas. We look at financial sustainability. So we look at the way that you set your budget, you monitor your budget, you deliver your budget, deliver savings, how you plan into the medium term to ensure that the council remains sustainable. And clearly, given that we are, 13, 14 years into austerity, that becomes an increasingly challenging position to deliver. So we spend quite a lot of time looking at that. The second area that we look at is governance, and clearly this committee has a key role to play in terms of the governance of the council as those charged with governance, but it's all about how the council makes decisions. Does it make those decisions based on complete and accurate information, and is there appropriate challenge to those decisions being made? And then the final area is the 3 E's, economy, efficiency and effectiveness. And this is all about how you deliver those services and how you prioritise delivery given the limited resources. So as suggested, Chair, I will take you through the high-level summary. I am conscious that it's quite a detailed report, and that's deliberate because it's required under the NAO code, and it does require 2 years coverage. The work actually has been undertaken initially by my colleague Jason Granger and more recently by Joanne Taylor, both from our VFM team, and unfortunately neither of them were able to attend today, so it's down to me, and I will endeavour to answer the questions to the best of my ability. But in terms of summary, I know, Chair, you mentioned coming up maybe to the exec summary, but I probably, if I could, I just want to take you to Appendix B, which is on page, it's right at the back actually, it's on page 44 of your paper pack, because I think this is quite important because it sets out the different type of recommendations that can arise as a result of the external auditor's VFM work. So you'll see there that the most serious, at the top of the table, the most serious type of recommendation is what we call a statutory recommendation. And we really, as auditors, reserve these for the most serious concerns that we have about arrangements at an audited body. They are few and far between. They are what I would deem to be the nuclear option, but they are becoming a lot more prevalent, and you will be aware from the press of some high-profile councils that have had statutory recommendations as a result of the auditor's work. A lot of these are around concerns over financial sustainability, but not exclusively, and actually a large number of them are around decision-making and often disagreements and challenges between officers and members and member behaviour. So really importantly for you, no statutory recommendations. The next level down, what we call key recommendations, and these arise when, on balance, the auditors consider that in any one or more of those 3 areas I discussed earlier, there are not appropriate arrangements in place. So we conclude that you do not have arrangements in place, sufficient arrangements in place in each of those areas. Once again, no key recommendations. So what you're left with is the lowest level of recommendation, which is the improvement recommendations. And I think you've got 8 of them in this report. And these are more to do with strengthening and building on what you've already got in place and refining those arrangements. And I think really, as I said, it's quite a long report, but you can take some degree of confidence in that in terms of, for the 2 years concerned, in our view, generally, it's fit for purpose in terms of arrangements. But you will see, when you've read a bit of the detail, that positive message is reflecting the council as it is at the moment. And I think it's fair to say that the council is changing. It's in the process of moving into a different period. And I suspect you probably only need to go forward 18 months and it will be a much more complex, larger organisation. So bringing in Cheltenham Borough Homes on its own is a massive undertaking. Lots of benefits, potentially lots of risks, almost doubling your workforce, and that would be a big ask to manage that effectively. But as I've set out, I think on page 15 of the report, there is a large number of complex, ambitious projects that, whilst they offer lots of really good opportunities for the council, inevitably, because they're innovative, and there are associated risks, and it's really crucial that that is carefully managed, and that you fully work to ensure that you ensure there is capacity within the organisation and the skill sets to do that across all those areas as you move forward. The days of councils being risk averse are long gone. It is now about being risk aware and taking informed risk in a careful manner, having regard to the inherent risks and bringing in support where possible. So, Chair, that is really just an additional observation that we've put into the report, because I think if I were to be continuing as your appointed auditor, I would be spending a lot more time on our VFM work going forward, and I'd be diving in a lot more detail into those very areas that you're embarking on that I've set out on page 15. But I think you can take a lot of assurance from what you've seen here in this report. Do you want me to stop there, Chair?
Roughly. I want just, if you could, just for the record, sort of set the context of why now and why we got to the 2 years together, and how that fits into the backstop process.
Yep, so the new NEO code, the new VFM code, was effective for 2021. As I said, it was a much more involved review, and as a result, auditors were given more time to undertake that work, and therefore, as with a lot of councils, there is quite a significant delay in reporting. We were delayed in reporting 21-22, and as with a number of other councils, the decision was made that rather than issue 21-22, and then 6 months later, 22-20, we would combine them. But what this now does, you will see that this is called an interim auditor's annual report, because I couldn't call it a final one, because we haven't concluded on the 22-23 opinion audit. But what we have done is we've signed off the 21-22. So once this has been presented, and you put it up on your website as an interim, I will then be able to close the 21-22 audit, because the opinion's already been given. Now we've discharged our VFM role, and therefore I will be able to issue a certificate which confirms closure of the audit. So 21-22 is done. And that then leaves the small matter of 22-23. And as those of you that were in attendance at the last meeting of this committee, we discussed the backstop, and I think we were all of the same view in terms of that being appropriate given the circumstances. Clearly, there was consultation made nationally on that approach. I understand lots of stakeholders have responded to that consultation. We await the outcome of that consultation, and we're expecting that soon, and that's going to need to be soon because the deadline in that consultation was the end of September. So as soon as that consultation is considered and we have the final guidance, I will be in touch with the council to agree how we do that. It doesn't negate the need for you to produce accounts for 22-23 and publish them. It would just be different in terms of what the auditor does in terms of my opinion on those accounts. And once I've given that backstop opinion, which has to be done by the end of September, but I would very much hope I can do it a lot before that, then that will then close 22-23, and it then is straight into 23-24, I suspect, with your new auditors.
Thanks, Pete. That's very helpful. So I think that we're now clear, although we haven't actually got the results of that consultation, it's very likely that that backstop will be 30th September, when effectively we'll be as caught up as we have been for some years, I suspect. I don't know. Anyway, it's good that we'll be able to put 21-2 to bed after this, and we're making progress with 22-3, and obviously it's great that we haven't got any issues in those first two categories that you mentioned. But if we can now just move on to the issues that you have identified in terms of areas where we ought to be carefully considering the situation, if you like. And the first of those is your first recommendation, and it's under the heading use of resources effectively, economy, efficiency, effectiveness in the council's use of resources. So that's page 17 and ending in the recommendation on page 21. I don't know whether Paul or Gemma want to say something about that recommendation, what you're already doing in terms of addressing that. That's so that's the recommendation that's on page 21 of our report. About governance and improving economy and efficiency and effectiveness, and it's about the development of leadership management.
So, I mean, firstly, I'd like to thank Pete and his colleagues for putting in quite a lot of legwork in terms of the end product that we have in front of us here today. And I guess it is also worth reflecting in terms of the outcome, because it would be lovely, wouldn't it, if we could see a report that had a sea of green with no improvement recommendations. But the reality is that if we're self-critical, we're always looking to improve, and I think to be in that place would be quite naive to think that there's no improvement required. I would also probably be brave enough to go on record and saying there's probably very few, if any, VFM reports across the country where there are no improvement recommendations, given the financial climate. There was a programme just last night, Panorama, a very well-run council in London, facing significant financial stress. And I think it's also equally recognised within the report that Cheltenham Borough Council has a huge agenda in front of us. It's had this sort of aspiration to be more commercial, risk aware, as Pete identified, and there's a huge amount of really exciting initiatives for both members and officers. Obviously, we've got the transition of Cheltenham Borough Homes coming back under the umbrella of the council, also aligned with some really high-profile sales, one being the building that we're in today, and obviously our 50% shareholding in Gloucester Airport. And I guess it's aligning that with why are we making those decisions, and they're really aligned behind that fact that we need to keep working towards financial sustainability. And with our number one priority about surrounding the Golden Valley, we need to, certainly from a finance perspective, mitigate that risk from a number of economic factors that have probably hit us post-COVID, with events in Eastern Europe and beyond, which has obviously had a huge impact on both inflation and more locally on interest rates. So there is a sort of golden thread in terms of everything we're doing. So I certainly recognise the huge ambition that you as a council have placed as the way forward. So in terms of recommendation one, I think it's very much picking up on that capacity, and clearly there will be a number of benefits. If I just use the advantage with Cheltenham Borough Homes coming together as one big team, obviously those teams will have more resilience, and hopefully we'll be able to ensure that the services that the taxpayers of Cheltenham rely so heavily on can be maintained for many years.
Thanks, Paul. So I think it's over to the councillors now. I'm aware, and I'm sure you are, of the developments in our project office that have taken place and are ongoing. But is there anything else you'd like to raise with Paul or Peter about, or Gemma, about that issue that you want to put on record here this evening? Matt, over to you.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. No, I mean, just to basically reiterate what's been said, I think it's, to me, it seems quite clear that the biggest risk this council has at the moment is around, particularly around sort of project management and, but the simple fact that we're putting such a big investment into Golden Valley, and I think for it to be highlighted here as recommendation one, with other things in there, I think is, yeah, absolutely right. And I think, our finance directors said much the same in other meetings as well. Yeah, I mean, given the size of our council, you know, if this project, there are big risks around this, and we need to be going into it with our eyes open. If we had £1 million project and it goes over, that risk can be carried within the budget. A £10 million project that goes over is going to hurt. But again, you know, there are steps you can take. A £100 million project that goes over is, you know, that we have issues then. That's not, you know, to put it politely, I guess. And I think, yeah, totally agree for it to be highlighted here as recommendation 1.
Thanks, Matt. And just for the record, really, we will keep a note of these recommendations and look at them at regular intervals in this meeting, as we will be doing the previous ones in just a second. But these are obviously the new ones coming forward to put in that log. So if we could then move on to the second section, which is from pages 22 to 27, and recommendations 2 and 3. This is from the financial sustainability front. And recommendations 2 and 3 are 1 about the savings programme and 2 about workforce strategy. So if...
Chair, do you want me to just briefly run through those two, just to outline the main messages? Would that help? Yeah, okay. Okay, so as you say, Chair, in terms of financial sustainability, 2 improvement recommendations. The first one's on page 26, and this is essentially reflecting, as with many councils, the reliance that you've needed to place on reserves to balance the budgets over recent years. And a recognition, as we all know, that is not sustainable into the medium term. And clearly, as Paul's outlined, that's one of the reasons why you are taking a number of steps to redefine what the council looks like and its main income sources going forward. So I suppose what we're saying here really is about, and it's difficult, isn't it? Because the budget is set in February every year at full council. At that point, you've probably only got up to month 9 in terms of outtime for the prior year. So when you're actually setting the budget, you haven't got a full prior year actuals to use to determine what is an appropriate budget going forward. Clearly, you can bring in lots of variables and lots of information that informs the budget, but the learning, what is the learning from overspends in prior years? And in particular, which is lots of councils' financial arrangements are being tested like never before now, given the financial constraints and austerity, and particularly the ability to deliver savings, and particularly recurrent savings. Because a lot of councils will find one-off savings, but then it just stores up problems into future years, and clearly a lot of councils out there will look very similar in 3, 4, 5 years' time. They might be a bit slimmed down, actually. Recognising austerity, clearly you will be quite a different organisation going forward based on what we said. So that learning, but also a recognition that even despite what you're planning to do, you will need to make further savings, you will need to generate further efficiencies, and you need to have a mechanism in place that is robust enough to ensure that when you do set a savings target at the beginning of the year, there's arrangements in place to ensure that you deliver that against the profile, and if you don't, what mitigation actions you need to take. So that's the first recommendation. And then the second one, which is under financial sustainability, but it could equally live under economy, efficiency and effectiveness, but it's about a workforce strategy and making sure that workforce strategy or policy is in place and aligns with the financials, but also the corporate objectives, not least given, as we've just referred to on a number of occasions, Cheltenham Borough Homes coming back in, potential economies of scale, and how that will look going forward. So those are the 2 recommendations on page 26 and 27.
Thanks, Pete. I was obviously born at the wrong time because I got to a senior management position just about the time when the concept of having a savings programme every year arrived. So for about 30 years, it was the bane of my life, if I'm honest, because my work was in the NHS, but it's incredibly, 1 year you can do it, 2 years you find, it gets more and more challenging every year, and I suspect it's the same in local government. But if Paul or Gemma would like to say how they attempt to cope with that situation. I'm on the budget scrutiny, so I'm aware of some of the work they do. But over to him for any comments on this.
Hi, Marianne. Yeah, absolutely. So I think those of you that have seen the peer review report we had last July, and also those that were present for the discussion in February's council meeting when we approved the budget with the savings target in, I think you'll be aware that obviously there's been a lot of discussion about that. I think in terms of the reliance on reserves and balances, I think that is a strategy that was employed in 22-23 in particular, but it was a decision that was made to use the balances that we had, and that's, you know, within the Section 25 report, that's what that assessment is for, to make sure that there is sufficient balances available to be able to do that when we need to, when there are uncertainties that we haven't been able to manage within the base budget. So thinking about inflation and rising interest rates that we've seen over the last couple of years. In setting the budget and the savings target for 24-25, a lot of work and preparatory work has gone into doing that. We've sat down with the Cabinet at numerous away days through the last 12 months or so to really understand how we will be enabled to do that. And there's a number of those savings that we've already been able to achieve. So once that budget was approved on the 23rd of February, we've already seen the delivery of that in advance of the start of the financial year. So that's very positive. I think you're correct, Chair, that it does get harder, and it is trickier as more and more savings need to be identified. But I think what we've seen, particularly in the decisions that Cabinet and the Council have taken in the last 12 months, is that as a council, you've not been afraid to be brave. So with the decision to bring our housing services back in-house, you're correct, we've talked about what a large undertaking that will be, but I think on the flip side then, that there will be significant financial benefits of doing that, because we won't need duplicate IT teams, IT contracts, for example, and back office costs. So I think not only just addressing the recommendation on the workforce strategy, not only have we invested in some of those areas, such as our HR team now, bringing our housing services back in time will only strengthen that. And likewise with learning and development, there's been investment made in those areas. So I think it's just making sure that we're continuing to take the right decisions, or the council is taking the right decisions to make investments where we think there is efficiencies to be generated, and making sure that we are looking at, like Pete said, over the last few years, what's happened with some of those areas of our budget where we've seen large variances, to make sure that we're using that information and feeding into future proposals.
Yeah, so, well, again, it's, you know, it's a huge point. I mean, obviously, we're in the throes of sort of finalising TUPE, and we have a identified date of the 1st of July. So I think obviously it's very, very key as part of that sort of work plan to ensure that things like terms and conditions are aligned as closely as possible, and to ensure that obviously we have one workforce which is streamlined and working to the same culture and values. So from my perspective, it is evidently sensible to create and sort of draft that workforce strategy after the completion of that particular TUPE. I mean, I'd just like to add, if I can, in terms of what Gemma said, because it's right. I mean, you know, you talked, Adrian, about the number of years you had in the NHS, and Pete and Gemma will know that I've been doing this role for probably getting on for 2 decades now, and it doesn't get any easier. But one thing that I really do like is 2 of the values that were orchestrated by the staff of this council, which are find a way and get it done. And so, you know, whenever anyone says to me, oh, you know, the size of the gap has got bigger, my response these days is we will find a way and we will get it done. And every year at full council, whether it's difficult decisions that have to take place, we do obviously deliver a balanced budget. And from my perspective, we need to cling on to the reality of what the longer term sustainable vision is, and that was always geared around, yes, an element of commercial activity, whether that be through the purchase of office or retail in the form of a supermarket, which has generated significant income to support those services, whilst we geared up to the longer term aspiration, which was becoming self-financing through what is actually our 2 biggest forms of income, and that's council tax and business rates. And what we're seeing now coming forward, both at North West Cheltenham and hopefully soon to be West Cheltenham, is that growth that was anticipated. And in the latest iteration of the medium-term financial strategy, which I think has still got a good element of prudence in it, is that actually you're going to see that long-term growth in council tax yield and business rate yield, which will certainly shore up those that sort of annual conundrum of expenditure is increasing and income isn't keeping pace. And obviously the main reason for income not keeping pace, certainly in the last couple of years, is because inflation has been double digits, and council tax can only go up by 2.99%. So that creates that gap almost annually.
Yeah, I particularly echo that last point, because obviously monitoring is key, and I think we have got some good monitoring arrangements in this council, but there's absolutely nothing you can do with an inflation shock and the interest rates problems that arise from it. So although the last year particularly, there was what appeared to be an overspend, that was almost entirely due, I think, to that shock. So I think the arrangements we have in place for regular monitoring, that after all, that's the key in the end, isn't it? Because not everything's going to work out perfectly, but you plan, 3 months in advance of a year, but if you're regularly monitoring, you can keep a good track of it. So, and also I'm with Paul also on, in terms of it makes much more sense to work more on the workforce plan once you've got the workforce has gone from 200 to 400. It would make no sense to do it all now. Any comments from Matt or Stan on either of those 2 recommendations? Oh, okay, let's move on then rapidly to the next section, which is the one from 28 to 32 on governance. It's recommendations 4, 5 and 6. Pete, do you want to take us through that section?
Thank you, Chair. So we're now on to governance, and this is all about decision making and challenge, ensuring that there is appropriate controls in place over key decisions. And it's a real challenge for local government, because there's lots of structures traditionally set up within local government, and a lot of criticism has been levied at councils in the past for being overtly bureaucratic in terms of decision making. But the challenge for yourselves is to make sure that governance is proportionate. It ensures that there is proper consideration given to key decisions, but it doesn't become so involved in so many layers that it takes too long to do. And clearly, what we've got on pages 30 to 32 is, well, 30 to 31 is about the role of this committee and about ONS, and the importance that those committees will play going forward, because I think your role will change, and that of ONS going forward, because clearly the council has been on a pretty level playing field in terms of its roles and on what it does, for many years, but that's changing, and there will be this transition you're going through. So the importance of actually having assurance that it's effective, and, and I can make observations about how it works, and it seems very well run to me, but clearly it's important that you go through that process and consider and get that view from all stakeholders. And there is a sit for checklist that can be circulated that lots of committees like this use periodically to get views and to look at how it operates. And also the recognition that as councils get more complex, and they all are, and they are becoming ever increasingly diverse in the way they operate, and you are that very thing, ensuring that there is the right skill set on this committee, and best practice suggesting that that should involve independent members. And that's independent members, i.e. not councillors, people with certain skill sets. And, as part of that audit committee effectiveness, where are your skills? Where maybe there may be gaps? Is there anybody that you can bring on? And the ideal is two. Lots of audit committees I know have struggled to get one, but because it's all well and good identifying any skills gaps, the next thing is trying to find people to come out to do it. But if you don't try, you don't know. So there is a recommendation around that effectiveness assessment, independent members, but also ONS as well, in terms of the way that operates and making sure that it is absolutely able, alongside this committee and the other committees and decision-making bodies, support the right decisions and ensure there is appropriate challenge, but it is not overtly bureaucratic. And sorry, Chair, the final one then on 32, which is the Constitution, which is a suggestion of that being revised and updated and to reflect the changing nature of the Council.
Thanks, Pete. So there's a group of South West audit chairs that meets on a fairly regular basis, and I was aware that a number of other audit committees were starting out on this self-assessment, so that's great, and I welcome us going through that process. I think in the background that's about, we're setting off on that journey, and I look forward to that. Independent members, personally, I'm all for them. I think that would be excellent to bring in one or possibly two. So that's an aspiration that I have. I hope Paul shares that. I haven't actually discussed it with him, but I'm sure he would. In terms of the ONS committee, not really too well briefed on that. But I think we're talking about bringing forward a forward plan there, and I'll certainly discuss it with the the ONS chair, and I'm sure there'll be some work behind the scenes on that as well. So, Paul, do you want to comment on it?
I think this particular section, I think the recommendations, management have taken them as read and been, I think that's reflected in the management comments. We are and have actually already started the process of the self-assessment with Lucy and her team, who obviously are our internal auditors, South West Audit Partnership, and as part of that review there will be consideration for independent members. I guess in terms of my personal opinion, I would look at those as critical friends and can only add value, so I certainly wouldn't be against or pushing against that scenario, and I guess it's very worthwhile testing the market to see whether we can identify individuals that will potentially add value to this committee.
Yeah, I think we can see tonight that we're clearly not quite as sexy as the council meeting yesterday. So I think if we can get some people who are independent and motivated to help us, that'll be a really good thing. Okay, opportunity for any questions from Matt. Thank you.
So I just wanted to ask, just for context, very roughly, what proportion of councils or audit committees, I should say, have independent members on at the moment? Because is it a very common thing, or is it something that's being sort of pushed more recently?
So my reflection would be, and I've probably attended almost most councils in the South West Audit Committee at one stage or another. If I went back 5 years, very few indeed, probably less than 20% had an independent member, singular. I would say over 50% do now. And I've seen probably a good 20% that have two.
Yeah, that was my strong impression from the Southwest group, that most of them now did, and that they felt they've been a real plus point. So, you know, it's about having a good interview panel and getting the right people, but I hope it's something we can explore. Right, Stan, okay? Yeah. So, moving on to the final section, which is improving economy, efficiency and effectiveness, from page 33, and recommendations 7 and 8. Pete.
Thank you, Chair. So the final two recommendations are in relation to economy, efficiency and effectiveness. So we've got one in relation to the partnership policy, and I suppose this is all to do with having a policy that outlines and is very explicit about, because you do not operate in isolation. And in order to lever in service delivery, you have to work with partners across all sorts of private, the third sector, NHS, etc., private sector, to deliver services, and being very clear that when you enter into those partnerships, what is the aspiration, what is the purpose, what are the outcomes that you're looking for to ensure that they are delivering against expectations and they're actually not just soaking up resource and capacity without delivering what you hoped in the first place. So that becomes even more important as you become more of a complex organisation. And then the second issue is in relation to waivers, and it's just really, I mean, this is probably the least concerning of all of them, but it's really just a process here about ensuring that you understand the nature and the extent of them and the value of them, and understand that why they're appropriate, and to gain assurance that that waiver is appropriate. And that, I suspect, might be an important issue as you move forward into the next 12, 18 months.
Thanks. So as long as I've got that right, you're not actually suggesting there is currently a problem with waivers, because something I certainly wasn't aware of.
Sorry, Chair. So I'm not suggesting there is anything inappropriate. I'm just saying that it's important that lots of audit committees receive periodical reports on waivers to understand why a waiver was necessary, and to ensure that there is, when you're going out, or whatever it may well be, to ensure that there is appropriate competition and that best value is being achieved.
Yeah, I was just reflecting back on what SWAP had indicated to us as a committee, that I think that, you know, their audits have suggested things are okay. But I mean, I understand that going forward it might be more complex, and you know, this may be helpful to have this recommendation to look back on. Anything you'd like to comment on that, Paul? Okay. Anything from Stan or Matt on those two recommendations? Anything concerns you have? Excellent. Okie dokie. Well, just briefly, perhaps on pages 37 to 40, the previous recommendations, just to have a quick look through there. Most of them are actually deemed to have been addressed with no further action required, which is excellent. If we look at number 7, well, perhaps if we run from 7 through to the end, and this is probably more for Paul and Gemma, is there anything here you think we need to be aware of that hasn't happened, that we should schedule in, or over to you? And 1 to 6 have all been effectively dealt with, as has 8. So it's just 7 and 9 onwards.
No specific concerns that I wish to raise. I think certainly the corporate risk register and risk management policy has gone through a number of iterations. In fact, at the last committee, there was some discussions about how that could be improved further through the use of grids, so that members can see the direction of travel. Obviously, I can give assurance that the actual risk register, certainly the corporate risk register, is reviewed by the senior leadership team on a monthly basis, and I'm more than happy for that report to come to either every audit committee or as and when you require it. But it certainly comes here on a regular basis. But if is required to be more regular, then more than happy for that to come forward. Clearly, every report that comes to whether it be Cabinet, Council or this committee will have a risk section, so I'd like to think that members are fully informed in terms of where we are monitoring risk and how we're trying to mitigate them, but as I said, I think scrutiny is a really important element to ensure that officers have, one, assessed them right, and two, got the right mitigations in place.
Thanks, Paul. Do you want to say something about the others directly or shall I?
Well, again, in terms of council, recommendation 10, so council will probably be aware that we had a product called Clearview, which unfortunately went into liquidation, and so we've since been looking at procuring and have procured a new performance management system that's, I wouldn't say in development, but obviously will need to come forward. So I think once that's well established, and when I mean well established, it's embedded within the workforce, then I think we'll get some meaningful performance related data, which again can come to either this committee or overview and scrutiny committee. And in terms of recommendation 13, for those of you who monitor council vacancies, you will note that we are currently out to advert for a strategic procurement manager, and once that person is in post, clearly some of the key aims for that individual will be as laid out in recommendation 13.
Okay, thanks, Paul. I'll switch it off. So in terms of KPIs, that feels to me more something that should go to those committees which are managing those particular areas than something that comes to us. That would be my thought on that, although obviously it's always helpful to develop those KPIs where appropriate, but that doesn't feel like something this committee would necessarily get too involved in. In terms of the risk process, I think that is us. So in terms of the regularity, I haven't really given that much thought, but certainly, how many meetings have year 5? We wanted to go to at least 2 of those, didn't we? Have something coming to those, I'd have thought. Yeah, I think that's probably all I had to say on that. So anything else on the final page 41, the opinion? I guess you've already covered that to begin with, haven't you? Yeah. So for me, that's covered it, but anything from Matt or Stan about that they'd like to discuss with Pete or Paul? If not...
No, I can't see anything that is concerning. I think the members that have put this together have done a great job. And it looks very hard work, and we look as though we are going to go forward, you know, very securely, which is nice, you know, which is good for the people of Cheltenham.
Anything else, Matt? Or are you happy for me to bring it to a close? Right, I confirm there's no vote required and that members have considered and commented on the report as recommended. I think that's probably as far as we need to go, is it, Judith? Yep, thank you. So there are no other items that I deem to be urgent and requiring a decision, and our next meeting is on the 17th of April. Thank you very much.